Tonight, Saskatchewan wins round one in the fight over Rafferty. A compromise in the new look of Saskatoon's hospitals. And tough talk from Canada about Iraq. Good evening. Round number one is over, and Grant Devine has won it on a technicality. Ottawa tried to get a court injunction today to stop construction of the Rafferty-Alameda dams, but a judge decided work can continue for at least one more week. Marc Genuist reports.
Lawyers for the federal government came to court in Saskatoon to get an injunction. These lawyers are trying to stop construction of the Rafferty-Alameda dams. A group of protesters who want the dams stopped also showed up outside the court. The project is in southeastern Saskatchewan. Ottawa says work must stop. It says the province has to wait until the federal environmental panel holds a review. Lawyers for the province argued for an adjournment. They told the judge they needed more time to prepare their case. The judge agreed and gave Saskatchewan 1 week to prepare its case. That's a victory for the man in charge of the project.
We certainly didn't win the war, but I think you can say that we won the battle, the skirmish. And I'm very pleased with the result, which I might add was not unexpected.
The federal lawyers say the battle will continue next week.
There are ups and downs in every case, and we're ready to argue next Thursday. We were ready to argue today, but we'll be ready to argue next Thursday as well.
This is the first legal victory for Saskatchewan. If Ottawa had won, the court would have ordered work to stop immediately. But Saskatchewan won, and it now has 7 days to finish construction. And if it hurries, it might be able to finish most, if not all, of the work it had planned to do this season before the ground freezes. Marc Genuist, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Grant Devine is calling today's decision a partial victory, but the Premier says there shouldn't be a court case at all. He says Ottawa is letting major projects go ahead in other provinces, but not in Saskatchewan.
Across the country, people are recognizing the whole process is really haywire when you can have an old man river that now you can just do the whole project, finish the dam, fill it full of water, and then study it. We've had 2 studies, and they've been passed every environmental test we've had so far. Now they want to stop it after we spent $400 or $500 million on a power project and the water project. So,
the federal environment minister got word of the judgment late this afternoon. Robert Decotre says he has no problems with the 1 week delay before the case goes back to court.
What I wanted was a resolution from the court as soon as possible, and I don't think in circumstances like this that a week is a major setback.
Decotre says it's a complex case and the judge should take his time before making a final decision. Well, a final decision hasn't been made about Rafferty, but the province has made up its mind about what to do with Saskatoon's hospitals. As we told you last night, a new board is going to be set up to oversee the hospitals, and services are going to be moved around. But the changes are far less drastic than what was recommended by the Atkinson report. We have 2 reports now, the first from Kim Trynacity.
If everything goes ahead, Royal University will do more, St. Paul's Hospital will stay about the same, and City will lose a big chunk of its responsibility. It's the government response to the problem of every hospital doing the same thing. This is what's going to happen. At Royal University Hospital, more child and baby care, specialty programs in surgery and treatment, and it'll be the Center for Heart Treatment. At St. Paul's Hospital, it will be the Major General Hospital. There will be child and baby care and a new adult psychiatric unit. And at City Hospital, it will become a geriatric center, an adult physical rehabilitation center, some general medicine, but no child or baby care. The minister calls it a kind of a compromise. But not everyone is so enthusiastic. The multi-million-dollar City Hospital is almost half finished. It was designed as a general hospital. Now most of it will be turned into a geriatric center. City Hospital won't need as many beds, and it won't deliver babies anymore.
I'm not sure we had a choice before us. There were some decisions that had to be made given the commissions of the last 2 years. Those are the directions that they've asked us to take. We weren't consulted in the decisions that were made. They were made for us.
Royal University Hospital will deliver more babies. It says it has the space.
When we opened our new expansion, we moved wards from the 1955 building into the 1988-89 building. And so we have unused space, which we have been waiting for a blueprint to bring that into active use.
The government's plan is a big departure from the Atkinson report. The minister says it even has support from those who wrote Atkinson.
Dr. Atkinson, for example, is very aware of what's being proposed here today and is very supportive, as are the other two members of his panel. Very supportive of this and says that it's a very excellent structure.
We couldn't reach Dr. John Atkinson today because he's in Europe. A member of his staff told us he didn't know the government plan was coming out, but that he's eager to find out what's in it. We did reach John McKay in Vancouver. Mr. McKay was on the panel that helped write the Atkinson report. He says he's not surprised, but he is disappointed. He said turning City Hospital into a geriatric center is a waste of a brand new building, and he said that's not needed in Saskatoon. Kim Trynacity, CBC News, Saskatoon.
We think it's an improvement from...
Family physicians in Saskatoon say today's plans for the 3 hospitals are better than those in the Atkinson report, but they're worried about what will happen to City Hospital.
Under the plan that's being proposed at the moment, there will need to be new construction to the University Hospital to house the new obstetrical unit. And we think there's really no justification for spending more taxpayers' money adding on to a hospital when there is room for these programs at City Hospital.
Gagne is afraid that once City Hospital becomes the new center for geriatric medicine, it won't be used to its full capacity, leaving some hospital floors empty. When asked if the reorganization of services will mean fewer jobs, the health minister had this to say.
We don't anticipate layoffs.
McLeod says nurses will be transferred among the 3 hospitals, but the Saskatchewan Union of Nurses says it wants guarantees jobs won't be lost.
We need the assurance from the authority and from the individual hospital administrations is that nurses will be able to transfer freely, carry their seniority and their benefits.
The Nurses Union is hoping to get those assurances from the people who are organizing the changes, the new Saskatoon Health Authority. It wants an immediate meeting with the group and the administrators of the 3 Saskatoon hospitals. Marianne Cloack, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Joining me now in the studio is reporter Kim Trynacity. Kim, how will this new super body, the Single Health Board, affect the way hospitals are run?
I think part of the problem is sorting out the name. It's a very long name. But it was created, Cathy, to sort of supersede what hospitals already have in place, to take away from some of the petty complaining and competition that went on between the hospitals. It will take some decision-making power away from the local boards. It'll be responsible for budgets, for determining how many staff members hospital have. It'll have a lot of power. But also local boards will remain in place to take a look after day-to-day operations.
Okay. Now, there was concern by some groups that St. Paul's Hospital would lose its maternity care, and therefore some pregnant women would have to go to a hospital that also performs abortions. Has that been taken care of?
Yes, it has. The health minister was able to quell some of those disturbances and complaints. St. Paul's Hospital will now look after baby care. Controversial procedures like abortions and tubal ligations will now be done at Royal University Hospital. That is being taken out of City. However, there is a small window available under general medicine where some of those procedures might be able to be done at City Hospital.
Okay. Now, could there still be some changes in McLeod's plan?
Well, as in every government policy, there is room for negotiation, they tell us. There are some groups that are still have some concerns, like the family physicians that were mentioned in the previous report. They're still hoping that some of the things will be changed. The minister says that might come down to what the authority thinks.
All right. Thanks very much, Kim.
You're welcome.
And we'll have an interview with Saskatchewan's Minister of Health a little later in our broadcast.
It was just the eeriest feeling, like 2 big sandbags were hanging off my elbows.
Computers may make life simpler, but they may also make some people's lives more painful. Repetitive strain injury. That story later on Newsday. Not everybody is happy that the RCMP is going to let native Mounties wear braids. The force made the decision yesterday, and while it's being hailed as a good move by a lot of people, there are some exceptions. Sally Haney reports.
This is the kind of tradition Terry Lewis wants to preserve. The retired Sergeant Major says he's against any change to the RCMP uniform, including long hair.
It's going to detract from the tidiness, the neatness of the uniform, but it just doesn't fit in my view of the Mounted Police.
But the commissioner of the RCMP doesn't want to discriminate against natives who don't want to cut off their braids.
I've never taken a knife or scissors to it at all, and, you know, there's a tradition attached to it.
Gordon Washteshte hasn't cut his hair in 18 years. The university teacher is pleased with the decision.
Well, I think it's good that Canada has finally recognized that this very country is made up of a multiplicity and diversity of cultures, and this is a way of paying recognition, you know, to Indian people.
But braids aren't for everyone. Special Constable Walter McNabb respects the decision, but worries braids could cause him problems on the job.
There's that potential there. For the safety of the person, you might get into a little scuffle with somebody and all of a sudden you get pulled by the hair, and then that's, you know, that's one mark against him or whatever.
The decision to allow braids comes just months after the much more controversial decision to allow turbans. The RCMP decided braids, just like turbans, are a religious symbol rather than a simple custom, and therefore have to be allowed. Sally Haney, CBC News, Regina.
The Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations is being criticized by some of its own members. Today, several Indians gathered outside a hotel in Saskatoon where the FSIN was holding its annual meeting of chiefs. They're angry because the chiefs refused to let them speak. The group says it wanted to share some of its concerns over land claims and economic development.
Within our traditions, when a person had something to say from the community, they were allowed to say it. They were never held back, based on the principles of respect and treating another human being with dignity.
This is the second time the Federation has been accused of not letting members speak at meetings. The Federation says they would have been allowed to talk if they'd gone through proper channels. A group of people were in Saskatoon today grappling with some of life's more difficult questions. They're members of the Commission on New Reproductive Technologies. John Sadoway reports.
This panel's job until the end of this year is to listen to opinions about some of the world's most serious moral issues.
The underlying principle is that human life begins at conception, and either we as a society will give equality of protection of life to all life, or we won't. At the present time, it doesn't seem that we are.
The panel is listening to groups' positions about reproductive technology. Scientific processes like in vitro fertilization pose difficult legal and moral questions. The technology is far ahead of the laws that may be brought in to govern it. The courts might question, for example, who is the mother in this fertilization if the egg comes from one woman and grows in another. This commission was set up by the federal government to help decide what laws, if any, there should be.
We're just now gathering the wide diversity of opinion that Canadian people have, and it's very important for us to listen to that whole diversity and then consider what we can do in terms of either moral or social policy making.
Jansen and the other panelists move on to Toronto next. The commission will report to the federal government sometime next year. John Sadoway, CBC News, Saskatoon.
About 1,200 more people will soon be able to grab a seat at Sask Place. These work crews are putting in the last few sections of seats, but they've got a deadline. There's a new Kids on the Block concert November 3rd, and tickets for these seats have already been sold.
The project is on time and on budget at this time. Most of the metal standards are now fastened to the concrete, and the first shipment of plastic seats arrived yesterday.
Wood says the new seating project is costing about $1.7 million. Well, last Tuesday, we told you that Pratt & Whitney, a big American aeronautics company, is thinking about setting up a plant in Saskatoon. The province and the city are trying to put together a deal to attract the firm. In the story, Al Dider of the Chamber of Commerce commented that Saskatoon is keen to get new business, but he said the government must be careful to make sure taxpayers' money is not wasted. Dider feels our report made it appear that he was commenting on the Pratt & Whitney proposal. In fact, he was speaking about another deal and not about the American company. Our mistake. Well, now Eric Forbes is going to bring us up to date on the weather. Here he is now. Eric?
Got up to almost 20 degrees today. Now, a low tonight of about 3 degrees, mainly clear, and I wonder if you chicks will like this. It's going to be partly cloudy tomorrow with a high of about 12. Not all that bad. I'll have more on the weather a little later. Kathy?
Thanks, Eric. Doug, basketball's back in the news, is it?
Yes, it is indeed,
Wow.
and take some bee pollen for that cold. The Storm blew out of town a couple of months ago, but they didn't take all the good basketball players with them. The U of S Huskies host their annual Ironman tournament this Friday and Saturday at the Education Gym, and Huskies coach Steve Roth says the field is top-notch.
Well, we're going to have a great field. We got two teams who were at the CIU National Championship last year. Brandon University Bobcats. They had in fact had won the two previous national championships, and the University of Alberta Golden Bears, and they went into last year's national tournament as the #1 seed. So extremely good field from that perspective. And then the third team, University of Regina, had a number of player changes, but extremely talented, and people should recognize 3 or 4 players that played with the Canada Summer Games up here in '89.
And I'll have more on the Husky Hoopsters and a look at last night's highlights from the Blades game in Prince Albert. That's all coming up in sports.
All right, thanks, Doug. Coming up on CBC Newsday, changes to Canada's immigration policy. And still ahead, Joe Clark says we don't need the UN's permission to go to war. More people and more money to train them. The federal government unveiled its new immigration policy today, and it includes letting more immigrants into the country over the next 5 years and spending $200 million on helping them adjust to their new home. Karen Webb reports.
This morning, Barbara McDougall told the House of Commons the government wants a record number of immigrants to come to Canada next year, 220,000.
Mr. Speaker, we propose a moderate increase in total immigration over the next 5 years, rising from 200,000 people this year to 220,000 next year, and to a maximum of 250,000 in 1992 and beyond.
Later, in a news conference, the Minister of Employment and Immigration outlined a 5-year program. In addition to bringing more people to Canada, the government is narrowing the rules for family class immigrants, restricting it to parents and dependent children.
That what we've tried to do now is go back to a kind of Canadian value of a family.
Instead, she said, the emphasis will be on admitting more skilled immigrants. McDougall also introduced a new immigrant integration strategy designed to help immigrants adapt better to what the government calls Canadian rights and responsibilities. The strategy also includes more money for language training. The opposition parties liked that part of this morning's announcement, but were critical of the government's decision to cut back on family immigration.
In Liberal governments, family immigration, family reunification class was up to 48%. Here we're down to 30%.
And there was concern on the part of the New Democrats that the government isn't spending any money to promote immigration to Canadians.
And I think it's a government that hides its head in the sand when it doesn't recognize that it has to do something with respect to allaying the concerns and the fears of Canadians.
Another place the government isn't planning to spend money is in the schools. This morning, the minister said that although immigration is clearly the federal government's job, helping school boards cope with more children who need second language training is a job that belongs to the provinces. Karen Webb, CBC News, Ottawa.
External Affairs Minister Joe Clark says that Canada is ready to go to war in the Persian Gulf, even if it means doing so without the United Nations blessing. Julie Van Dusen reports.
Clark and Defense Minister Bill McKnight appeared before the House of Commons External Affairs Committee this morning. Clark told committee members and later reporters that Canada prefers to wait for United Nations sanctions to work against Iraq.
If diplomatic arrangements fail, and if Saddam Hussein is not otherwise capable of being moved from Kuwait, then obviously there will have to be a recourse to force.
And Clark said it would be best to engage in military action with the approval of the United Nations.
We are working now as hard as we can to ensure that any action that is taken within United Nations context.
Opposition members who were at the committee said Clark's remarks are dangerous and mark a departure for Canadian foreign policy.
Canadians should be deeply concerned about the refusal of the Conservative government of Joe Clark to clearly state that Canada will not be involved in any military offensive which is not specifically under the United Nations auspices.
I hope that as a result of the statements today, Canadians will wake up to what we're into. I think that we have been sleepwalking on this issue for the last couple of months, frankly.
At question period, Clark said that because permanent members of the United Nations Security Council can veto military action, Canada must leave its options open.
If there is a veto exercised by the United Nations that makes it impossible for a United Nations command, does he want Canada to say, stay where you are, Saddam Hussein? We don't.
That until all has failed, the United Nations must get the complete, unqualified support of this government and of this parliament and of this country.
Who will make this decision? Will it be the United Nations? Will it be the United States itself? Will it be Canada? Canadians deserve and need to know the answer to that question today.
Clark says that if Canada becomes involved in a shooting war, Parliament will be consulted. But he says there are decisions that must be taken by Cabinet, and sometimes in the event of war, there is no time to consult. Julie Van Dusen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Meanwhile, top U.S. officials say Iraq is offering to swap Canadian and German hostages in exchange for high-level diplomatic visits. The U.S. Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense have both told a congressional committee in Washington that Iraq has invited Joe Clark to Baghdad. Today, Dick Cheney appeared on American television, and he said the offer from Saddam Hussein is an attempt to use hostages as bargaining chips.
We know for a fact yesterday, for example, from a conversation between President Bush and Prime Minister Mulroney, that the Canadians were contacted, were told that a number of Canadians would be released if they sent a high-level delegation to Baghdad. It's an effort to try to break up the coalition that's been assembled against him, but I don't think it'll be successful.
How did the Canadians respond?
They basically, I believe, told him to buzz off.
Prime Minister Mulroney says he doesn't know what Cheney's talking about. He told reporters in Ottawa today that his government has not received any such offer from Hussein. Israel has rejected the latest UN effort to investigate the deaths of Arabs in Jerusalem earlier this month. They were shot by police. Last night, the UN Security Council unanimously condemned Israel for refusing to cooperate with the inquiry. But Israel says cooperating would amount to giving up its sovereignty over internal affairs. Bill McLaughlin reports.
Israel's army this morning continued to seal off roads in and out of the West Bank and Gaza, keeping some 1.8 million Palestinians bottled up inside the occupied Arab territories. That continues to be the main story here, as the government and much of the population shrug off the latest barrage from the UN Security Council as just more of the same UN anti-Israeli bias. Israel's officials accuse the UN of refusing to understand that accepting an international inquiry into the police killings of 22 Palestinians on Jerusalem's Temple Mount is an unacceptable violation of Israel's sovereignty.
What we don't want is the UN or anyone else telling us how we should run Jerusalem. It's our sovereign capital and has been for the last 3,000 years.
Palestinians charged the UN vote was useless because it didn't include sanctions against Israel.
The UN Security Council resolution is very weak because condemnation is not a practical step.
Officials here also charged that the UN's focus on Israel is exactly what the enemies of the US and Israel want.
What the United Nations Security Council did played into the hands of the PLO and Iraq.
But officials here also admit privately that the slayings on Temple Mount have created a terrible problem for Israel, one they hope will be solved once the government releases the findings of its own investigation. Sources here say the commission report on the Temple Mount killings will be released tomorrow. The sources say the report will be tough and put much of the blame for the tragedy in Jerusalem on the leadership, or lack of it, of the Israeli police. Bill McLaughlin, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
There's a new treatment and new hope for infertile women who want to become pregnant. It involves a tiny balloon, a lot like the ones used to help some heart patients. Diane Diaz has the story.
In Chicago, 10-month-old Rebecca is living proof that the new procedure works. Initially, her mother, Cathy Franco, couldn't get pregnant because of blocked fallopian tubes. Doctors say it's a problem for hundreds of thousands of women in this country.
The lowest point that I could remember was how my wife was going to make it through life without a child.
It was very hard on our marriage.
Then the Francos tried an experimental procedure called transcervical balloon tuboplasty. It's a way of reopening the fallopian tubes by using a tiny balloon at the end of a catheter, much like the technique used to unclog heart arteries. The procedure takes only 20 to 30 minutes, and doctors say once the equipment gets FDA approval, the balloon technique could save thousands of women from major surgery or costly in vitro fertilization.
It is definitely a revolutionary step because it is replacing major operative procedure.
The success of the technique is revealed in this week's Journal of the American Medical Association. Of the 77 women in the test group, 1/3 of them became pregnant within 6 months of the treatment. That goes for Cathy Franco, who's busy with Rebecca and is now expecting child number 2. Diane Diaz for NBC News, Los Angeles.
Coming up on CBC News Day, a look at the weather with Eric Forbes. Stay with us. Eric, I just don't understand it. It warms up outside and I get a cold.
I don't understand that either.
I don't...
See your physician, Cathy.
All right, meantime... better than the bee pollen advice I got from Doug, anyway.
Okay, in the meantime, enjoy the weather. Got up to 19 degrees. Here's what we have right now in Saskatoon. It is presently 18. A few clouds, winds out of the south at 7, and a nice warm day at 19 degrees. Yesterday, Calgary's weather was up to 20, so we got what they had yesterday. 8 degrees is the normal, a high of 8. Is the usual, and -7 is the usual low. -3 is the, rather than -7 is what we got last night. Usually it's -3. The sunrise tomorrow, 7:52, and the sun setting at 5:50. Around the province right now, great temperatures, 24 degrees at Swift Current, 22 at Kindersley, and cooler, of course, up around Buffalo Narrows and Orange. Okay, eastern Canada right now, St. John's, Newfoundland, clear skies there, 12 degrees, cloudy in the Maritimes, and 6 degrees at both Halifax and Fredericton, 8 in Montreal, cloudy there, cloudy further north in Quebec. Down around Toronto, 5 degrees, and cloudy around the James Bay area, northwestern Ontario, 2. In the west, Winnipeg with 12, clear skies there, cloudy further north also here in Saskatchewan, up around Yellowknife, it's cloudy, -3, 18 for here, 22 down at Regina, 14 for Edmonton, and down at Calgary, some overcast there, 19. At British Columbia, cloudy skies there in the interior, 16 for Victoria and Vancouver, and clear skies up around the Whitehorse area, 1, looking at the big satellite shot. A nice configuration. You can almost see the frontal line there, the little low-pressure system. Let's have a look at its position. It's great because it's given us the cold front still to the west of us, in behind it, the northwest winds, but we're in that warm air sector. Nice air around here, very balmy, and winds right out of the south now. As that low goes by, the winds will shift, and tomorrow it'll be, well, to the east of us, and as a result, we'll get air out of the northwest to flow from 30 to 50 kilometers an hour, so it's going to be breezy and cooler, and then it'll warm up as the effects of the sun give us a nice, not a bad weekend. The forecast now, first of all in the north tonight, cloudy with showers, south winds at 20, a low of 0, and for tomorrow, partly cloudy with showers, west winds at 30, a high of 7. For Saskatoon tonight, a few clouds, southwest winds at 20, a low of 3, a nice night, and tomorrow, a little different. Cloudy periods, northwest winds gusting to 50. Hang on to your hat, a high of 12 degrees, and then it warms up a little bit. Well, not really. Let's say it's 9 degrees on Saturday, but because the wind will be not so great, it'll seem like a warmer day. And cloudy on Sunday, 11 degrees, and Monday, clear skies and 8. You talk about color, a great picture from Joni Meister at St. George School. Isn't that great? That is a vivid picture. Thank you, Joni. Here's the address to send the pictures to CBC TV, 5th floor, CN Tower, Saskatoon, S7K1J5. Cathy?
Thanks, Eric. Well, if you type a lot, you may already know this. Too much technology can be a bad thing. Although computers are meant to simplify life, for many, they've had the opposite effect. As Robert Bazell tells us, doctors are now treating a medical problem called RSI, repetitive strain injury.
Dorothy Ellis can no longer comb her own hair. Her husband has to do it for her.
I need you to cut me some Velveeta, too.
He also has to cut her food. Her hands have become almost useless because of repetitive strain injury, RSI, what many doctors call the occupational disease of the 1990s. She also can only watch as her husband plays with the children.
My son asked me why I didn't love him anymore, because I didn't do the things I used to do with him. So I had decided that they needed a different mom. I tried to commit suicide that night.
Mental depression is common among people with serious cases of RSI. Mrs. Ellis had 7 operations, including one that damaged her left eye. Mrs. Ellis was a telephone operator for U.S. West, formerly Mountain Bell in Denver. She was one of more than 200 there injured from typing all day on computer keyboards before the company got this new equipment. When Mrs. Ellis and 12 others could no longer do their jobs, the company fired them. RSI occurs when a person repeats the same motion thousands of times a day.
The injury process keeps on going, and the healing process never gets a chance to work.
Often the tendons become inflamed and put pressure on a nerve in the area of the wrist known as the carpal tunnel. A common form of RSI is known as carpal tunnel syndrome. For years, workers in industries including meatpacking and auto manufacturing have suffered from RSI. But now it is a growing problem among the 25 million Americans who work on computers.
Human beings evolved as hunter-gatherers. We didn't evolve to sit in one place and type tens of thousands of keystrokes per hour for 8 hours a day without moving or getting up except to go to lunch or go to the bathroom.
Newsday, a newspaper on Long Island, New York, also has a big problem with RSI. Lori Garrett, a science reporter, had one of the worst cases.
I reached a point where I would wake up in the middle of the night and my hands would be like dead slabs of meat. They had no feeling. I couldn't will them to move. It was just the eeriest feeling, like two big sandbags were hanging off my elbows.
In recent years, researchers have been trying to figure out exactly what causes RSI and how to prevent it. Several computer manufacturers have designed equipment to cut down on the incidence of the problem. The new equipment installed here at US West and at Newsday is adjustable. Each operator can raise or lower the computer screen and keyboard. There are also wrist rests and foot rests.
What that does is elevate the monitor.
Experts say the same techniques can be employed at any workstation. At the Center for Repetitive Strain Injuries, Tammy Carver, a nurse practitioner, shows how to adjust a typical computer station.
Try that. How's that feel? Feels good.
Let's see if we can find your restful state.
US West now trains operators to take easier, lighter keystrokes and to take breaks. The beeper indicates when they are typing too hard or too fast.
Restful state.
Experts on RSI say that such prevention efforts are crucial because for some people, such as Mrs. Ellis, RSI can be a lifelong crippling disease. Robert Bazell, NBC News, New York.
Coming up on CBC Newsday, big changes at Saskatoon's hospitals. We'll talk to the provincial health minister about what's in store next. As you heard earlier on Newsday, the provincial government outlined its plans for Saskatoon's 3 hospitals today. While each hospital will have an area of specialization, the reorganization did not go nearly all the way towards fulfilling all of the Atkinson report's controversial recommendations. Joining me in the studio is Health Minister George McLeod. Mr. McLeod, you didn't achieve your goal of avoiding duplication of services. Why the compromise?
Well, first of all, the term compromise and failure aren't necessarily synonymous terms. I think what we have to do and what we have to realize about Atkinson's report is that his recommendations were the ideal if we were starting from scratch with no facilities in the city and with this population and the same projections. Dr. Atkinson agrees with the proposals that are coming forward, not proposals, but the actual plan that's come forward today. Really, Atkinson's report served to break the logjam of some of the disagreement that had gone on in the city for so long, in that he put forward, here's what the plan should be if it was nirvana, so to speak.
So why couldn't you follow his report?
Well, it was frankly impossible to follow, given that we have 3 facilities in here now. We have we have regeneration at 2 of the major facilities that have gone on over in recent years. We have a new construction project underway at City Hospital right now. There will be very little change in the configuration of capital construction at City Hospital by doing this. And frankly, City Hospital being the newest, most modern facility in the city and in the province, will have a focus and an exciting opportunity here for the future of healthcare delivery, which is geriatrics, care of our elderly, rehabilitation, all of those areas, liaising with the community services, all of those things. So it's an exciting opportunity to use City Hospital in that way.
Now, there's been criticism, though, that University Hospital has ended up with the baby care center, along with St. Paul's keeping its obstetrics and gynecology, because University Hospital is going to have to build something to take care of those patients, I've been told. whereas City Hospital already has it in place. So why was that switch made?
Well, City Hospital doesn't already have it in place. I mean, City Hospital, City Hospital is under construction now. Rehabilitation and geriatrics, that area that I just referred to, is a very key area in the future of healthcare. So City Hospital is accommodating that, a tremendous opportunity for that hospital and that new facility. As far as University Hospital building, they won't have to build new. They will have some regeneration as they expand what they have. But remember, as we talked about maternal child care, University Hospital now has a very excellent program in the neonatal unit and all of those areas. They have a large pediatrics unit. Most of pediatrics will be at University Hospital. So really what's happening is that we're enhancing the maternal child care unit that's now at University Hospital. We're enhancing it, making it larger, and it just fits very, very well with what needs to be done.
Were you bowing to public pressure when you left St. Paul's Hospital as a community hospital and let it keep its maternity? Because there was a lot of controversy over that.
There is public pressure, but I would say to people the plans and the outline for St. Paul's Hospital to be truly a general hospital and a community hospital speaks directly to the nature of where St. Paul's Hospital is, the fact that it's long history as a community hospital. You can't have a general hospital and a community hospital without doing obstetrics, low-risk obstetrics here. And pediatrics, a small pediatrics ward at St. Paul's Hospital speaks directly to that, to the traffic patterns, to the location of St. Paul's Hospital in the Saskatoon scene. All of those things were elements of the discussion.
Okay, quickly, I want to move along right now to the Saskatoon Health Services Authority, the board you've set up. Is this not just an extra layer of bureaucracy that's just going to cost more money? No, it isn't. It certainly will not cost more money. In fact, I would predict that this authority, because of the powers that are vested unto it, will be able to save us money. Each of these three hospitals, as people in Saskatoon will know, and well, people across the province will know, are very large enterprises unto themselves. They have very large bureaucracies in their own sense, and a centralized authority like this will, I predict, be able to spend less on administration. But you don't really have a price tag yet? No, I'm not putting a price tag on because I don't think we should tie it to one, but I'm very confident, and so are people who are on the authority, and some of whom are chairmen of these boards and so on. They believe that can be accomplished. All right, thanks very much for talking to us tonight. Thank you, Cathy. And coming up next on CBC Newsday, Doug Dirks and the sports. Stay with us. Doug, where'd you get this idea about bee pollen, by the way, before we head into sports?
I'm not even in the studio, and you're picking on my theories. Have you ever seen a bee with a runny stinger? Case closed. All right. Well, folks, it's that time of year again. This used to be called Shenley time in the CFL. Now it's not even called Miller time. I'm talking about the nominees for this year's Outstanding Player Awards, and there are several deserving riders on the list. Steve Ruddock has the details.
The rider picks for CFL awards this year are a mixture of old-timers and new guys. Leading the way with his 8th straight lineman nomination is guard Roger Aldag. He won the award in 1986 and 88. He's been a Canadian All-Star the last 4 years. Slotback Ray Elgard is the club's pick for top Canadian. 8 years in the league, this is his best ever. He leads the West Division in receptions. He now holds team records in total reception and yards gained. He's been the club's nominee in this category 3 times now. He won the trophy 2 years ago. As for new faces, running back Lucius Floyd is the club's nominee for Outstanding Rookie. Coming off the bench when veteran Timmy McRae was injured, his work keeps McRae off the starting roster. He's healthy now, too. On the rider defense, 10 of the 12 starters are American, but Canadian linebacker Dan Rastovich gets the team nomination as top defensive player. Always a good special teams man, number 74 leads the club in tackles with 77, putting him 7th in league stats. Of all the players, Dan is the most excited about his nomination. He's been around now for a few years, turns 30 next month, but is just now showing his full abilities.
Through my career, I've been fairly healthy. You know, I haven't had many serious injuries, and I don't know. I think one part of the game is having a strong desire to play. You know, and I've always had that, I think, and I still enjoy playing the game, and I love it.
And in the final category, quarterback Kent Austin is the team's pick for Outstanding Player. Given the #1 job this year, he leads all other quarterbacks in passing stats. He also set 4 personal and team records this year.
And go get 'em riders. Mario Lemieux's career might be over, though. Lemieux is undergoing treatment for a rare lower back infection called vertebral osteomyelitis. The infection is in the area of the herniated disc Lemieux had repaired back in July. His doctors say Lemieux is recovering and may be back on skates in January. That's maybe back on skates. Bob Probert will be back on skates tomorrow night in Detroit. A U.S. judge has ruled that Probert won't have to go to jail until his deportation appeal is heard. Proby still can't leave the U.S., though. The Blades are probably wishing they wouldn't be allowed to leave the confines of Sask Place. The Blades wrapped up a 6-game road trip last night in Prince Albert, another road game and another road loss. The Raiders jumped out to an early lead on the power play. Dan Kisa deflects Laurie Billick's point shot past Trevor Robbins. PA led 1-0 through 20 minutes. The Raiders go up 2-0 midway through the second period on a shorthanded goal by Norwegian import Tommy Eriksson. That's the way it stood through 2 periods. Donovan Hextall bags his 7th of the season earlier in the third. With the teams playing at full strength, 3-0 Raiders at that point. The Blades finally saw rookie goalie Mike Langen a couple of minutes later. Bader scores his 11th of the year, cutting the deficit to 3-1. But Hextall buys the Raiders some insurance, blocking Jared Bednar's point shot. Hextall feeds Pellerin. He beats Robbins, making it 4-1. And Dave Struch cuts the lead to a pair with a late goal off a scramble in front of Langen. The Raiders add an empty netter for a 5-2 win over the Blades. And the Blades finish up their road swing with 1 win in 6 starts. Regina visits Sask Place tomorrow night. The U of S Huskies host the annual Ironman basketball tournament tomorrow and Saturday at the Education Gym. The Dogs are looking to improve on last year's 3-17 showing in Canada West play.
Quickly, come on. This is Coach Roth's 3rd year with the Huskies. He spent the summer as an assistant with the Storm. The Huskies are small, so Roth says his Dogs will play a stormy brand of basketball this season.
The Storm is up-tempo. They're not a slow-down, bang it in there. They don't have Kareem or, Elijah Wan. They got Brian Pollard. And he's up-tempo. They alley-oop to him. He shoots the 3. And that's exactly what we have. So from that perspective, it helped me. And I think probably more than anything, it helped the players realize that you can play that style of game and be very, very successful at it. And the kids are really looking forward to be able to take that, what they saw this summer at Sask Place, and use it here in our gym.
The Huskies are small and they're young. The University of Victoria has 7 fifth-year players. The U of S has just 2 fourth-year players. Power forward Blair Garneau is one of them, and Garney knows his role.
Well, I'm 4th year, the oldest guy, I guess, and see myself as a leader on the floor. Show the rookies, how everything works in university. It's a big change from high school. A lot of them are on their own for the first time, and I just see myself as just a leader on the team, I think.
The Huskies have 6 rookies on their 15-man roster, which means players like sophomore guard Brad Schoenfeld will see a lot of floor time. Schoenfeld knows the Dogs are long on youth and short on height, but Brad says the Huskies stand tall in the confidence department.
We're really positive this year about how we're going to do, and we're really hoping to improve our record. We aren't going to obviously, win a national. We aren't expected to win a national championship, but we aren't counting ourselves out.
Coach Roth shares Schoenfeld's optimism. He's predicting a top 3 finish for this year's Huskies.
And the U of A plays Brandon in the Ironman opener tomorrow night at 6:30. The Huskies tip off against Regina at 8 o'clock. Ladies and gentlemen, in this corner, heavyweight champion Buster Tubby Douglas. In the other corner, Evander the Rock Holyfield. And the bell rings in about an hour's time in Las Vegas.
Holyfield, the challenger, is favored, in fact, to beat the champion Douglas. Apparently, people still find it hard to believe that this happy-go-lucky former junior college basketball player knocked out the ferocious Mike Tyson.
It was a joy, man. It was a dream come true. A long time, a hard road, very hard road.
And now he's back on it, a lot richer and a little fatter. Working out for Buster is a real chore. Thank goodness for the music. It pumps him up. Besides, in another life...
I think I'd be a rock star.
Can you sing?
No, be a musician or something. It depends on how good the acoustics are, The background singers, I have extraordinary background singers. Lip sync, yeah, I do that now, lip sync, yeah. So I'd be excellent.
That sure would be easier than putting up with this, or with him. Evander Holyfield, 210 pounds, 32-inch waist, 19.5-inch neck.
We think certain people look tough. For instance, we think you look tough. Now, do you think that also? And do boxers think that when they look at somebody else?
Yes, I think a intimidating factor is the way an individual look. And And with me, the average individual look at me, won't even bother me. They move on.
Good advice for anyone but a boxer to heed.
Well, Douglas may not win the fight, but he will be singing all the way to the bank. $19.2 million is what he'll be taking home, win or lose. And here's predicting the Pillsbury Doughboy will be kissing the canvas by round 6. Of course, I wouldn't bet money on that. I didn't bet on the Cincinnati Reds either. A busy weekend of volleyball already underway at Mount Royal Collegiate. Today's action wraps up around 9 o'clock. The tournament goes 9 to 9 tomorrow and Saturday, same time. Should be some great volleyball being played there. Tim Simpson and Greg Norman are tied for the lead through first round action at the Nabisco Golf Championship. They both must be eating their shredded wheat. And lots of NHL hockey action tonight, Cathy. The Maple Leafs are playing St. Louis. They lost last night to the Blues 8-3, and there's a lot of talk in Toronto that if the Leafs lose as badly tonight, they are going to be looking for a brand new coach. Coach Bob Carpenter will be taking his tools to the unemployment line,
okay.
I think.
All right.
And that cold, the sports doctor, Steve Chisholm's going to be here tonight. Maybe he can take a look
Well, I'll
at
have to hang around and ask him about it.
Okay, that's
Thanks, Doug. We'll be back right after this. Stay tuned. To review one of our top stories tonight, the provincial government laid out its blueprint for Saskatoon's 3 hospitals today. If everything goes ahead, Royal University will deliver more babies. St. Paul's will provide about the same services, while City will lose a big chunk of its responsibilities. In fact, most of City's new building will be used as a geriatric center. Health Minister George McLeod said he'll appoint a board to oversee the hospital system. He called today's changes a kind of compromise to the controversial Atkinson report. That report had called for more sweeping changes to all the city's hospitals. And here's Eric Forbes to remind us about our weather, and it's going to be really warm, is it?
Tonight, particularly, Cathy, with a low of 3 degrees. Winds won't be so bad, but tomorrow you'll notice them out of the northwest, gusting to 50, partly cloudy, and a high of 12 degrees. Saturday, sunny skies, and the wind's not so bad, a high of 9. Doug?
Lots of NHL hockey tonight on the agenda, but of course the big fight between Douglas and Holyfield. If Douglas beats him and goes on to fight George Foreman, they may never hit each other with those big tummies in the way.
There'll be belly bumping. Belly bumping, that's it. We'll be back tonight at 11 with more on Newsday Final. Have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.